Hello and welcome to a CX Moment. In these candid conversations, we chat with leaders about what's happening with their business, their support centers, and with their customer experience. This week, we're joined by Jon Smith, the head of customer experience for Calendly. We love questions. Jon is so ready for questions. So ask them in the Q&A and we're going to do our best to answer them all. And if you like what we're chatting about, please go ahead and share it using hashtag CX Moments. Now that the logistics are out of the way, let's get started. I'm Sarah Reed from Zendesk, and let's say hello to Jon from Calendly. Hey, Jon.
Hi, Sarah.
How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing very well today. How are you?
Good morning indeed. It is Thursday. We're getting close to the weekend. Things are good.
Absolutely.
Now, you're in Atlanta. How's the weather? How are things?
We are faring a lot better than some of our other friends in Texas and other parts of the country. It is cold and rainy, but we'll take that. And thinking about folks who are in tougher situations right now with snowstorms and all those things. But
absolutely, yeah. If you are one of those people joining us today, we certainly appreciate you using whatever electricity you have to join us, and hopefully our conversation will warm you up a little bit. All right, well, the first place I want to start with you, Jon, and we've known each other a long time. You have a fantastic customer experience history. You've been doing this a while.
Wow.
And you are what I would deem a success story. You started as a technical support rep, probably not in the job you expected to have for a very long time, but what led you to leading up a support organization at a company like Calendly?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. For me, I think, I was young and looking for anyone that would hire me at the time out of school, trying to, I was interested in technology, but I was really trying to get my foot in the door, which I think is a pretty common thing for most folks who enter a customer service, a technical support type role. I started as a technical support rep for a software company, a small software company in Atlanta. We were a startup, and one of the things I fell in love with was just problem solving, and not just problem solving for customers. It was also problem solving for my teammates, problem solving for other parts of the business, just really finding, what kinds of problems I could solve. And so that was a long time ago.
But you're still solving problems.
Absolutely. And so I was focused on, let me solve the problem right in front of me. So this support ticket. And then also, how can I solve, the next problem that the customer might have? And then from there, it just kind of led to this idea. For me, I kind of looked around and said, what problems need to be solved? And do I have some skill that may be valuable in helping solve those problems? And so that led me on a journey of growing up through the ranks from a support analyst to a manager for that company, and then to a director. I spent 6 years at the Home Depot solving all kinds of interesting customer care problems, and then went to MailChimp and ran support for a few years, and then landed at Calendly. And for me, I think my journey has been, for the success, whatever success story it is, has been because I've tried to solve the problem right in front of me. And I think what I teach, customer support folks is, if you can solve the problem right in front of you and look for problems beside you to solve, because that's kind of the business that we're in customer service and customer support, people will entrust you in solving bigger and bigger problems. And I think that's been my journey. What I found to be true is I've solved problems really well in certain areas. And then as I've grown, I've been entrusted to solve bigger and more interesting problems. And that's the way I've thought about my career path.
And is that also some of the advice you give to individuals that you're mentoring, or people in your contact center who are like, oh, I'm not sure that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Yeah. I think I give 2 pieces of advice for people that are in support centers or starting out early in their career in general. One is that you do have to try to figure out how to love what you do. You're not always going to be able to do what you love. And so there are times when, maybe your interests or maybe your desires aren't quite aligned with the role that you're doing. How can you fall in love with the work that you're doing today? And how can that lead you on a path where you can potentially, do work that you love because you've learned to love the work that you do. So that's one piece of advice. The second piece of advice is the problem solving piece. I think most managers or leaders or people who kind of grow and evolve in their career are really just tasked with solving different problems, right? So if you're in customer service, you may be solving a problem for a customer. If you're a manager, you may be solving a problem for an associate or an employee. If you're the CEO, you may be solving a problem for a market, right? So I think about career path less of a ladder and more of what are the problems that you're uniquely skilled to solve? How can you build skills to solve bigger and more interesting problems? And how can you learn to love what you do where you are? I think that's really important.
That's a phenomenal piece of advice. And
Yeah.
it's something that obviously applies across any industry and certainly isn't specific to customer support. But I think for many of us who started off, this isn't what I planned to do either. And I have to say, customer support, customer experience has provided me the most extraordinary career. Hasn't always been easy, but no position is, no career is. But it has been extraordinary. And it's also allowed me to build skills that have translated into many other areas. And so I have years of customer support to thank for that. My friend Elisa, who works for TimeShift, actually wrote a book about this. And she talks about, and she and I talk ad nauseum about the fact that no one goes to school to be in customer support. But those of us who do choose to love what we do have certainly made this really work. But I doubt it's worked for you every single time. So what along the way has really surprised you?
Yeah, I think what's been surprising about this journey for me, I think two things. One, no matter what you do, but particularly in customer service, you have to figure out how to overcome obstacles and challenges in creative and interesting ways. And what surprised me, I think, along my journey is how open other parts of the business or other people in the company are when you can take those challenges and you can actually find your voice. It took me a long time to find my voice as a frontline support associate. I was fortunate to have a mentor who she was fantastic. She was our manager at the time, and she helped me find my voice with product and engineering in a meaningful way. But I think what surprised me is how once you figure out how to articulate the value that you can bring from customers, from customer feedback, from what you know about the product, what you know about the business, and you can translate that to other people in the business, the willingness to listen, the openness, and also just the hunger and desire that people have for knowing more about customers, knowing more about what issues a product or a service is causing for customers. That's been surprising for me, or it was. It's not surprising anymore. I think you still have to continue to fight the battle of like proving the value and articulating customer insights in new and interesting ways. But that was surprising of just how the roads that it led into once I was able to articulate, my skill set and what I knew to the rest of the business, I think was surprising. The other thing is, I would just say the relationships, like in this type of business and this type of industry, there's just a community that we're all a part of. If you've helped customers at any point, I know, I correlate that all the way to, when I go, to eat fast food, I'm always thinking about the person behind the counter and their experience, right? I feel like just that relationship and that community of people that have done this type of work for a long time, the bond that has been built has been really amazing for me too.
I very much agree with that. And some of my best friends are people in the industry that I've met along the way and who have continued to be really good sounding boards to me. I think one of the fascinating things about support professionals is we're totally open with sharing our challenges and the things that are going right, going wrong, the mistakes we've made, because you can't, no matter how much you try. I can't replicate what you're doing at Calendly. It doesn't matter. I could take your entire strategy, I could take your blueprint, and I can't bring it to Zendesk and make it work exactly the same way. And so why not share what we're all going through? But we're going to talk about the community in a bit.
Yeah.
But first, I want to jump onto something that you brought up a few moments ago, and that was around the impact of customer experience and getting the other parts of your organization to understand that.
Mhm.
How have you ever been in a scenario where your C-suite hasn't been open to understanding the impact of a less than perfect customer experience? Because I
Mhm.
think many leaders do encounter that.
Mhm.
And how do you get them to get it?
Yeah, yes, the answer is yes. I think if you've done this type of work for any period of time, you've probably experienced leadership or other parts of the business struggling to understand the value of improving the customer experience. For me, I think it's come down to a couple of things. Number one, I've worked for very product centric companies, and so sometimes when you're product centric, you think about the customer inherently and paramount, but you don't think about the experience when something goes wrong for the
Mhm.
customer. So you're
Right.
building the product, you're focused on design, you're focused on the right things, which is the user experience and preventing issues from going wrong. But sometimes you don't actually optimize and work on what happens when something goes wrong, because it's going to happen, or what happens when the customer has a question or they're stuck. And so for me, what I've had to do and what I've found to work well is take the responsibility of packaging a listening package or themes around something, but put the customer's voice in there. So one of the things that I incorporate and that I've used in the past is actually customer quotes. So whether that's from a support ticket, whether that's from a phone call. So when you send, hey, we're having this issue, here's how many customers are experiencing the problem, and here's what that means to the business. You also want to put, and here's some exact quotes from customers about this. The more that you can break down the barrier from data and connect the human element of it, I think all C-suites, that's the human voice, the words of the customer are important no matter what role you're in or what business you're in. So I try to incorporate that as much as possible, and I think that has been a key to my success of breaking down that barrier. Because once you start seeing, oh, customers are actually saying these words, and that correlates to this issue that we have, right? Like, I think it just makes it more real versus being a chart or a report or a number that's being thrown around. Of putting actual humans, customer voice in that process, I think is really important.
Oh, I so agree with you. The voice of the customer feedback is just extraordinary. And it is incredible the reaction you can often get from leaders when they've never seen that black and white evidence of what they're doing and how that truly impacts a customer. Well, no surprise, we're getting a ton of leadership questions because I know this is something that you are so extraordinary at. And I was chatting last night with the CIO of Aramex in Australia, and he said that this, in his opinion, is the best time to be a leader
Yeah.
because this is an opportunity that we've never had before to make changes, take risks, do things differently. And so let's capitalize on that feeling and that approach.
Yeah.
First question is going to come from Betsy, and she is obsessed with empathy.
Okay.
Love it. Okay. How do you draw the line between being empathetic and firm with a customer and then wanting to be obviously the most human you can with them? What's the advice you give to your team?
Yeah, I think the key, we talk about, or we try to operate at Calendly in with transparency. So I think the key, with customer empathy and drawing the line, I think, is transparency, right? So I think
Mhm.
understanding that what are the customer's expectations, what is our ability to deliver on those, and being transparent about why or why not, we're why we're communicating the way that we are. I think the other thing is I always think about, people talk about empathy all the time, but I put a little bit of a qualifier when I talk about empathy. I always like to think about empowering empathy, not just empathy alone, but how can you use empathy to empower, whether it's your team or whether it's a customer. And so, for example, at past companies, we've had situations where customer was having an issue. It was clear that we weren't a good fit for the customer.
Right.
And so we've actually communicated with the customers and said, hey, listen, we may not be the best solution for you. And so let's help you. If you're interested, we can help you find another solution. That's, those are ways that are, it's tough to get that right. But when you get it right and you can use empathy to empower the customer, I think that's the key for empathy. The difference between, I think, being firm and being empathetic is that empowerment. So when you can channel it and say, all right, I'm empathetic. Now, what action can I put behind it using the empathy that I have? And then empower your team to make those decisions and communicate in that way. I think is really important.
I was recently on a support call,
Mm-hmm.
being the customer with an organization I shall not name, but it was for a home improvement project.
Yeah.
And what they sent me wasn't just broken. It arrived in more pieces than I could possibly count. And it literally was one of those things where it's like, what couldn't have been just one person who threw this box
Right.
onto a pallet or onto a van. It had to have been all 10 people who touched it along the way. So when I called the company, the representative was so fantastic, and she empowered me, and she also used humor. And she said to me, I can offer you a credit and we can try this again, but I have this feeling you're just going to want a refund and you're never going to want to work with us again. Yep. And she caught me so off guard with her candid approach, and she was laughing along the way. She's like, I wouldn't want to buy from us again if that had happened to me.
Yeah.
So that she empowered me to make the decision, and I felt good about it, and she seemed perfectly fine. And that leads to a question also by Claire, which I'm really fascinated with this. And she says she's been hearing a lot about the power of humor in support interactions. Mm-hmm. And while it certainly is easier to do over the phone, as the conversation I had with this advocate, how do you do it in written communication? Can you convey humor in an appropriate tone?
Yeah, that's always tough. I think that you can, but what I encourage people is it's interesting because humor is in the eye of the recipient. Right. So what I always encourage people is instead of focusing on humor or lightheartedness or however people, refer to that these days, focus on being yourself, on letting your associates be themselves, of the human voice and tone, letting them, I refer to it as almost like a sandbox where you have sides of the sandbox, which, the barrier might be your voice and tone. It might be your policies. It might be your company core values, whatever those are. But within those barriers, you can, the support specialist can build a sandcastle, they can dig a hole, it's like they can be themselves within that and have fun and enjoy kind of what they're doing. And so for me, I'm always encouraging people to be themselves, less about being humorous. And once people are comfortable being themselves, that's when the humor or when the lightheartedness or those types of things can come to the surface in a genuine way. I think the difference with humor is, if it's forced, it's always obvious. If it's someone being themselves and making a tough situation a little bit lighter, I think that works very well.
All right. So the lesson there is absolutely allow your frontline teams to be themselves, be their authentic self, and don't force these potential trends upon them. And they're going to come across in a way that the customer will respond accordingly.
Absolutely.
All right. I told you this was going to go fast. I want to jump back into the network conversation
Yeah.
we started just a little bit ago. And you and I have certainly had this conversation around, things that are super important to us: company culture, leadership, creativity, customer experience. How do you find that now? And how do you find the network of people in this day and age where we're not showing up at events and
Yeah.
getting together to talk about it? How do you find that now?
Yeah, I think that's tough. I think the last year with a pandemic, with most folks that I know going working digitally and remotely, it's been tough to find. Really, what you're speaking to is connection, right? Like genuine connection related to your professional work. For me, the way that I find that is honestly through. Through events like this. Sarah is not, Sarah didn't ask me to say this, but I think, there are times when I make intentional time to step away and plug into this type of an event, a 30-minute, webinar or something, to just check it out and see what I can learn and what I can glean from it. And then I actually intentionally, for better for worse, I track people down. So I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll send someone a message. I try to make that connectivity. I think the other way that I do it is just with my own team. I think understanding that the people that you work with need it just as much as you. So starting kind of where you are and then working your way out, finding things that are interesting to you, a skill you're trying to build, listening to someone talk about it for a little bit, and then trying to connect with them, saying, "Hey, I know you're busy. I know we're all like Zoom fatigue, whatever. Can I get a 15-minute phone call because I have a couple of questions about what you were talking about?" And I found people to be refreshingly open to those things these days because they're looking for that connectivity too.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought up LinkedIn, because I do think social media can be used for good. And LinkedIn is a perfect example of finding a network of people who are interested in the same things you are, going through similar challenges, or have bridged that already and can give that great advice. I know there's sometimes I get personally a little annoyed with people who call themselves CX experts or CX leaders.
Yeah,
And certainly I'm not a fan of the term futurist,
it's
but I do think that there are remarkably talented people out there that do get recognized as being CX champions and are great to talk about. Marissa mentions that you oftentimes give book recommendations to your network.
yeah.
Is there one that you would recommend right now for people in CX?
Oh man, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think right now I would recommend. Let's see. It's back here somewhere. There's a book by Ben Horowitz called "What You Do Is Who You Are." I think that's the title.
Okay.
It's about company culture. It's about culture in general, building culture, those types of things. I would honestly recommend that, no matter what you do, but particularly in CX. I think a lot of the principles that he outlines in that book, it's speaking toward building company culture and company values and those types of things. But I think it speaks very directly to how to build a customer experience culture. The undertones of it are definitely will cause you to think about how you show up every day. And I think I think it was James Clear had a quote that every action that you take is a vote on who you want to become. And I think right now, like a lot of decisions that you're making in customer experience or in your business and how in your strategy and how you show up to work is a vote on what you want to become during this crazy transformation of the world. And so I would recommend that. I think he has a lot of good advice and a lot of interesting stories in there as well.
I expect that book to rise to the top on the Amazon 100 today. Thank you. And I personally I just want to give a little throw out to Elisa's book, Undefined World. I think it does an extraordinary job at explaining why people come into support. And
Mhm.
it also provides a great understanding of the motivators.
Mm,
As leaders, we can better understand the motivation of
mm.
our teammates and of our frontline people, which I think is so imperative. All right, so we haven't really talked about much about Calendly or MailChimp because we've run out of time for all that. But I'm appreciative of all the leadership conversation.
Yeah.
But at Calendly, it's 2021. What are you investing in this year? Like, where's your focus area?
Yeah, we're investing in better listening to our customers. So we talked about voice of the customer earlier. I think for us, we're a quickly growing business, and our customer base is growing very fast. And a tool like Calendly, anyone can use it, and so you end up with customers of various size, use cases.
Skill sets.
Yeah, exactly. And so for us, really, kind of tuning in on listening to customers in a more meaningful way, and how do we get feedback at scale that we can actually make decisions on, I think is important. We're also focused on, I think like everyone else, of continuing to make it easier for customers to get help. Calendly, our value proposition is we're going to save you time scheduling meetings. And so we don't want to make that value proposition and then we hold you up on the flip side when you have a question or you have an issue. And so continuing to make it easy through various channels for customers to get help is really important for us this year.
And I would be remiss not to ask, how is Zendesk helping you with that?
Yeah, Zendesk has been very helpful. I think Zendesk, for us, the flexibility of the platform, the ability for us to integrate it into our listening channels so that we can, when customer leaves feedback, we can act on that feedback, I think is one way. I think the actual channels, chat, email that we offer, continuing to evolve those and make that easy for customers is another way. And then we do a lot of reporting on what we're seeing, what we're hearing. And I think Zendesk, with Explore, with some of the things that has evolved since I started using Zendesk many years ago, it's a fantastic tool, kind of end to end, to help us really support our customers and get a lot of insight into what they're experiencing.
And last question for you before I let you go about your day, how would you recommend managers help their teams find their voice? Like, what's your advice there?
Yeah, my advice is twofold. Number one, if you can cast a wide net in a conversation, that's always helpful. Invite frontline associates into the conversation, whether that's a Slack channel, whether that's a meeting, where you can. I think actual representation is really important. The second piece of that, I think, is being able to connect the work. So say, a problem that's being solved with the frontline customer support rep, of saying, hey, thank you for managing this issue, because you brought this up, we've now made this change, or we're improving this process, or we're sending this communication to customers. I think that correlation is also really important. It's really just building confidence and getting them in the room, I think, in either mentally or physically. I think both of those are really key to helping folks find their voice.
So it's really about showing them that what they do matters, and giving them the opportunity to talk about it in a productive and sometimes public way.
Yeah, absolutely.
As always, it is such a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure to talk to you and to hear all your great advice. But that's it for today. So thank you, Jon, for sharing your expertise and being one of those champions of customer service for all of us. Next on a CX Moment, we're going to be talking with Mako Medical, and then in April, we will chat with Calm. I think many of us have become Calm users over the course of the pandemic. In the meantime, please stay connected with each other and the Zendesk community. We thank you so much for sharing a moment with us. Be safe, be helpful, and we'll chat again soon. Thank you, everybody. Bye.